The TeraFlex Crankcase Vent System for the JK Wrangler prevents oil from being drawn into the intake when the vehicle is severely inclined, which helps stop things like the exhaust smoking or possibly hydro-locking the engine or other internal damage. The way this works is we add a second PCV valve to the system that goes from the oil fill neck adapter and connects to a line that runs from the intake manifold to a ball check valve. This valve closes when the vehicle becomes severely inclined, blocking the way to the factory PCV valve and forcing the vehicle to use the new PCV valve. Adding a second PCV valve ensures that the crankcase ventilation system always has air regardless of the engine's orientation while off-roading. Begin by prepping all the parts you will be installing. Install the O-ring onto the oil neck adapter. Put Teflon tape onto the threaded 90-degree fitting and install it onto the adapter. Make sure it's pointing upward. Wrap the threaded end of the two 90-degree fittings with Teflon tape and install them onto the ball check valve. Install the ball check valve onto the bracket using the provided hardware. Make sure the fittings are oriented correctly as shown in the written instructions. Assemble the hose that runs from the oil fill neck adapter to the T-fitting. Attach the hose clamps onto the 5/16 inch diameter hose. Connect the hoses to the new PCV valve. Make sure the arrow on the valve points to the longer of the two hoses, which will connect to the intake manifold. Adjust the hose clamps so that they are over the barbs on the new PCV valve. This will ensure there will be a good seal. Assemble the hose that will connect the factory PCV to the ball check valve. This starts with attaching a hose clamp onto one of the short 5/8 inch diameter hoses. Connect that hose and another 5/8 inch diameter hose to a 90-degree fitting. Connect the hose without the clamp to the reduction coupler. And then connect a 21-inch long, 1/2-inch diameter hose to the reduction coupler. The hose that runs from the intake manifold to the ball check valve will be assembled exactly the same way, except the shortest 7-inch long 1/2-inch diameter hose connects to the reduction coupler, then a T-fitting, followed by the 8-inch long 1/2-inch diameter hose. Attach the long end of the 5/16 inch diameter hose to the T-fitting. Remove the engine cover. Loosen the hose clamps on the intake elbow and detach the hose ends. Unbolt the intake elbow and pull it up to disconnect the plug on the underside. Then remove it from the engine bay and set it aside. Remove the two bolts on the right side of the throttle body and install the ball check valve bracket. When you replace the bolts, be careful not to over-tighten. We highly recommend you use a torque wrench to tighten to 5 foot-pounds so you don't over-tighten and strip out the threads. Remove the oil fill neck by prying up the tab with a screwdriver and twisting. The tab will likely break because the plastic has become brittle from the heat of the engine. Install the new oil fill neck adapter. Make sure the fitting is pointing upward. On the hose that runs from the PCV valve in the rear of the engine to the intake manifold, measure 5 3/4 inches from the end of the hose that goes into the intake manifold and mark it. Cut the hose at the mark and remove it from the intake manifold. If you want to disconnect the vacuum line, it will make installing the hoses easier. Put a little oil or lubricant onto the manifold connector and slide the new hose over it. This is the hose with the T fitting. Make sure it is seated all the way and slide the clamp over it so it seals the hose. Install the other hose onto the cut end of the hose that runs to the factory PCV in the rear of the engine compartment. Adjust the clamp to the end of the 5/8 inch hose so it forms a tight seal on the cut end of the factory hose. Remember to reattach the vacuum line if you've disconnected it. Route the hoses under the throttle body. Connect the hose that runs from the intake manifold to the end fitting on the ball check valve. The other hose that runs to the factory PCV valve connects to the other fitting on the ball check valve. Connect the final hose to the oil fill neck adapter. Use the provided ties to tie down the hoses. Reinstall the intake elbow. Make sure you reconnect the plug on the underside. Replace the engine cover, and that's it. If you have any questions about installing the TeraFlex Crankcase Vent System onto your JK Wrangler, leave a comment below or reach out to our customer service team.